Good morning. Today is the 28th day of November 2015 in our continuing series, Explorations in Savitri. We have now entered Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds, and we are on the canto, The Kingdom of Subtle Matter. We heard these past weeks of Mother's words on Savitri, and we begin today with Sri Aurobindo's own words. He answers a question. No, I do not work at the poem once a week. I have other things to do. Once a month, perhaps, I look at the new form of the first book and make such changes as inspiration points out to me, so that nothing shall fall below the minimum height which I have fixed for it. And then in 1932 he writes, I shall myself know whether it is a success or not, only when I have finished 2 or 3 books. But where is the time now for such a work? When the supramental has finished coming down, then perhaps. As always, we are here with our brother Alok, and we take up from where we left off. Namaskar.
And people believed that Sri Aurobindo was leading a retired life away from the world. In fact, Mother and Sri Aurobindo were the busiest of people who lived here. That their work was largely an inner work. For the Mother it was both inner and outer. But largely an inner work makes no difference to the fact that they were extremely busy and engaged with many things happening in this world and other worlds, but which had an impact on the evolution of mankind. So, Savitri, which is his most important work, for this he could get time once a month.
Yes.
And later on, as we know, he was in such a hurry to finish it because he regarded it as his most important work.
And this is between the 2 world wars.
Yeah, between
now.
the 2 world wars.
And then to finish Savitri, it's
Absolutely.
immediately after the
Yes,
Second World
yes,
War.
Yes. The second thing is that, with regard to Savitri, it's interesting that the mystics often choose poetry as a medium of expression. Now, the beauty of poetry is that unlike prose is very clear-cut, well-defined, and thereby it loses a large chunk of truth. This is a paradox, because normally we feel if something is very clear-cut, then it's true, it's closer to truth. But by the very fact that it is intellectually very clear-cut, it loses the infinite shades of truth which underlie anything.
Yes.
And the Mother at one place says that it's all right that you understand Sri Aurobindo in this particular way, but if you believe it is the only way, and if it's presented in a intellectually very clear manner, sometimes we make, as I was saying, hierarchy of minds and everything in a very clear-cut logical fashion. She says that truth escapes because truth is not like that. And it's very difficult to bring in the roundedness and the perfection of truth through prose. Now, Sri Aurobindo has done it even in prose, but for that he had to use lengthy, long sentences, which sometimes people don't understand, but that's the only way. He brings poetry into prose, synthesis. If you read the synthesis, even the Life Divine, it's very prosaic poetry. It's poetry which has taken the form of a prose. But in poetry, the beauty is that there are many layers which can be buttressed together, and that's why poetry is full of suggestions, because what the poet has seen, I'm of course using the word poet in the original sense, Kavir Manishi in the Vedic sense, Sri Aurobindo falls in that line, not like any poet. A lot of poets just writing some hymns and verses, and that's a different thing. But a poetry which is truly inspired from the highest realms, that poetry is burdened with suggestions. because it catches the symbol behind the outer reality. Otherwise, what the poet has experienced, what the mystic has experienced, or the seer has seen, is almost impossible to capture in a body of sound and words. It's impossible. Because it's a total experience, it's not just a scene. I may describe the moon and the beauty of the stars, but how do I describe the inner experience that I undergo? And the deity that lies beneath it, and the feelings that arise in my heart reaching out to the moon and beyond. It's impossible. And the beauty is that Sri Aurobindo is able to do it. And another interesting thing is that time and again we will see in Sri Aurobindo the spirit of oneness revealing itself through poetry, because essentially the world is built on a single plan. And that's what, those lines which we read last time, at once revealing the truth of something that happens in the subtle matter, kingdom of subtle matter, and a truth which is applicable to life. Both come together. Look at these lines where we stopped. Matter and soul in conscious union meet, like lovers in a lonely secret place, in the clasp of a passion not yet unfortunate. I mean, these 3-4 lines are burdened with suggestions which apply at many planes. And then he gives the clue. They join their strength and sweetness and delight, and mingling make the high and low worlds one. Yes. There is a whole passage where Sri Aurobindo speaks about love. And he says, what is that love which is neither a craving of the flesh, nor, a movement of desire, nor a passion, nor just an emotion, but something that leans from the heights to someone who is much, much below in terms of caliber and capacity. We see the high and low becoming one. And he also gives us the clue that love, as long as it has not entered the gross physical matter, retains something of its purity and beauty. But the moment it enters the body and this physical matter, the touch of the inconscient enters it. And therein all the darknesses, the jealousies, the possessiveness, the unfortunate aspect of love begins to come. Now, it's amazing that while Sri Aurobindo is revealing actually about something happening in the subtle physical kingdom, he is revealing a profound truth which is applicable at many levels. That's why when people say that, well, Mother has said there is everything in Savitri, what does it mean? Well, it means this, that everything in its essence is there. And if you are open, the revelations come. So this is what we read last time. And then, of course, the whole, once again, Sri Aurobindo reveals the cosmogony, the way the cosmos has been created. Intruder from the formless infinite, daring to break into the inconscient's reign, the spirits leap towards body touches ground, as yet unwrapped in earthly lineaments. Now, this is the spirit's leap towards body. Sri Aurobindo has described this experience in records of yoga as Maithun Ananda, a word which is much misinterpreted. Here, the word Maithun means the union of two, the spirit and matter, which I shouldn't say, but it's a fact that some commentators have very wrongly misinterpreted, because the word itself has undergone a distorted meaning. But it's spirit leaping towards matter as a condition for its own manifestation, because the spirit is formless, infinite. If it has to manifest itself, it needs forms. So it leans towards matter, things which are finite. It can create finite forms for the manifestation of the spirit. Till subtle physical, there is no problem. It plays beautifully. So he says, as yet unwrapped in earthly lineaments, already it wears, outlasting death and birth, convincing the abyss by heavenly form. So the spirit leans and takes up the different forms in the mental world, the vital world, and eventually in the subtle physical world. And up till then, the form that the spirit wears, the different beings, the different powers, energies, and forces and godheads, as long as they are wearing a subtle physical form, there is something of the spiritual light and beauty communicated, because it's indestructible. It is beautiful.
And when it's unwrapped in the earthly
that's
lineaments,
it.
it has its covering of immortality.
Immortality. That's the beauty. A covering of its immortality, alive to the luster of the wearer's rank, fit to endure the rub of change and time. So, in the subtle physical, if we see someone, it's different from this gross physical, though there is an approximation. But according to the inner being, the subtle physical provides a form. But gross matter doesn't always obey that. To an extent, it does. That's why there is a whole science that by just seeing the body, people try to know the inner being. Of course, Sri Ramakrishna is known to have done it. Sri Aurobindo and the mother, they wanted to see a photograph, and through the photograph they could enter into the inner being. But sometimes Sri Aurobindo is actually described looking at a face, that the forehead reveals this, but lips and the chin below reveal something else, and the nose reveals this. So even at the physical, the spirit tries to mold, but this is a very hard substance. Up till the subtle physical, it is according to the wearer's rank. So beautiful. Like you see, sometimes it can be a gross misrepresentation. Look at Socrates. Very ugly outside, to outer eyes, but very beautiful inside. So this is the big issue. And the subtle physical, of course, endures the rub of change and time. So it remains young forever. It doesn't, become old. And that is the big problem, that while we grow physically old, in the vital and the subtle physical, we remain young, creating a big disparity in our inner state and the outer body.
Yes.
So outwardly it's like, oh, old man, old woman. But it's not true. The vital remains young and the subtle physical remains more or less the same. It doesn't undergo the change. But the body cannot adapt. And this
the
is
psychic being is continuing
to grow. And that is the big problem, that if the body doesn't adapt, eventually death comes. So if it can adapt to the inner change, then the problem will be solved. That's what, the mother's work. A tissue mixed of the soul's radiant light and mattered substance of sign-burdened force. So, beautiful, this is sign-burdened force. Matter is that. And they come together, mingle. The soul's radiant substance, its sweetness, its light, its purity, mingling with sign-burdened matter. And the two together, weave this wonderful vest for the spirit. This is how it will be in the supramental creation. At one place, Mother says, on earth, everything is artificial. So, you want to wrap yourself, you buy some clothes, and anybody who is a little rich can buy very good clothes. Even if inside the person is full of depravity, he can buy clothes of a king and look very smart, and we know how deceptive this can be. But in the supramental world, it won't be like that. You have a certain inner feeling and inner experience, and accordingly you can cover yourself in that kind of an external clothing. So almost the same thing is being described, because the spirit, of course, is that, and it comes and takes on the subtle physical. And matter's substance of sign-burdened force, imagined vainly in our mind's thin air, an abstract phantasm mold of mental make. It feels what earthly bodies cannot feel. This is a big difference. All those who begin to become awake to an inner life, spontaneously their senses begin to sense things which the outer gross physical cannot. So they have to be faithful to their experience. They should not be carried away or misguided by those who say, oh, these are all imaginations. They're not imaginations. As I said the other day about the mother's touch on the forehead, or as if your hands have been held by the divine, and many other things, both sides. Because the tissue becomes very, very sensitive. Subtle physical is like that. But the gross cannot feel. There are people who say, well, I didn't feel anything. Well, it doesn't mean that there was nothing. It means that your senses are not refined enough. People don't look at it like that. So they look at it, well, I went, I didn't feel anything. Well, if you didn't feel anything, it doesn't mean that there is nothing. It simply means that you have to grow to a point. So this is another thing when when Sri Aurobindo say, well, people say Sri Aurobindo and the mother are in their golden bodies, but I don't see it, we don't see it. Well, we have to also progress to a point where we can actually see. There is a meeting point. When the senses will evolve to a point, it doesn't mean that man has to be supramentalized, but they have to come under the influence of the supramental, and they have to grow to a point where we will be able to actually see and experience the mother and Sri Aurobindo's golden bodies.
When Sri Aurobindo left his body, and Aurobindo Basu said to me, his body was not only golden, the whole courtyard was golden. And Udar says to Mother, I can't see it, Mother. She touches his head and he sees the whole thing.
And there are several places this is mentioned, different people having different experiences. Amal Karan speaks of this in Past, Present and Future, the mother. And she says that, how we have to also grow to a point where we can actually receive the impact of these bodies and see them. So this is the evolution that is destined and which will happen. But for the moment, our earthly bodies cannot feel many things and is more real than this grosser frame. That's what you were mentioning the other day. That all who have in contact with the inner worlds, it is amazing. The impression is so strong, that it's difficult to recall what happened yesterday. If one has to recall the physical events, they seem to be fading. They are not alive. We recall them as something dead. I am sure this happens with everyone. Like, okay, what did you do yesterday? So well, I went to dining room, I had my food. It's like a memory in the mind, but it's like a ghost past. But ask what happened 20 years back when you came to the ashram. Oh, that experience. Now you see how alive it is, how concrete it is, how real it is.
Exactly.
It's something which just doesn't fade. Till the last moment, I have seen people on their deathbed suddenly remembering that moment and their whole faces light up with a glow. So when people say, oh, this is very good to hear that it's more concrete. Well, once you have it, you know it, that it is much more concrete. It brings back all that state.
And it never leaves
Leaves you. Whereas, well, what happened yesterday or maybe today, breakfast, it's a memory which the mind recalls. But it has become a ghost of a dead past. After the falling of mortality's cloak, lightened is its way to heighten its ascent. So this is the other part, that why we cannot ascend, because the spiritual self in us, the soul within us, is so much identified with this gross frame. It is holding on to it, and the frame is holding on to it both ways, that it cannot ascend. It has to first disengage. But of course, when the body falls off, then its burden is lighter. And that's why even the physical body one has to work on the physical body while one is in this frame to make sure that the spirit can ascend. So if the body is very gross, either because of gross indulgences or because of gross habits, gross ways of thought, gross ways of even eating, sleeping, then it's very difficult to even practice true meditation. But if through physical exercises, through a certain degree of mastery over the body, a refinement of the senses, we actually prepare the body itself, it's much easier for the soul to disengage and ascend. So, all this secret in one line.
There are 3 beautiful lines in Yeats when he says, an old man is but a tattered cloak upon a stick, unless soul clap its hands, and all the louder clap for every tatter in its mortal dress.
Wow. Wonderful. Whose is this?
Yeats.
Wow.
Sri Aurobindo praises him very highly.
Yes, very much. That's right. Amazing. After the falling of mortality's cloak, lightened is its weight to heighten its ascent. Refined to the touch of finer environments, it drops old patterned palls of denser stuff. Patterned. Impress of many things which matter carries, which prevents us from advancing. It just drops off because it's no more needed. And that's what many times people mistake as, rebirth. But it's not rebirth, it's that certain gross tendencies in nature drop off at death. And these tendencies may actually, for a moment, because they are actual forces and energies, they may literally tag on to an animal just to satisfy those propensities. Mother gives two examples. Like, there is a saying that those who are very attached to money, when they die, they become a cobra. Well, they don't become a cobra, there is no retrogression. But what happens is that when they leave their bodies, if a part of them is terribly attached to money, now that part will drop off because it's necessary to leave it here. You can't carry it. So that energy will find some vehicle to tag on. So if it sees nearby a cobra, because they are known to be guardians of wealth in the occult worlds, so it'll just attach itself to that. Or, greed. So she gives another example, Sri Aurobindo gives this example, that, it can tag along to a goat all the time who is munching. So these are not really important things from one perspective. Only thing is they prevent us from ascending. And at death, they are just dropped off and they for a moment exhaust themselves and finish off. But to say that this man became a goat or, is absurd. But this is the kind of thing that goes on in, pseudo-spiritual circles. Cancels the grip of Earth's descending pull, like rockets, when they go up, they have to, in the first phase, that which propelled it massively has to be dropped off. This is the first phase of all rocket propulsions into space. So it does that and bears the soul from world to higher world. So in the subtle physical sheath or the vessel, we can go from worlds to higher worlds. Till in the naked ether of the peaks, the spirit's simplicity alone is left, the eternal being's first transparent robe. So this is how it goes, the journey after death, that in the vital is dissolved, the vital sheath is dissolved, in the mental world, the mental sheath is dissolved, and then it goes into the pure psychic world, where just that spirit's luminous transparency, the psychic sheath, the psychic being itself is formed of two elements, the true soul, the inmost soul, and a personality which develops around it. That's what forms the psychic being. This personality develops because of contact with the experiences of earth and later on even of other planes, but primarily earth experiences. And that alone is left eventually. That is not.
And needs time.
Yes, to assimilate.
Yes.
Which comes in the same book, but Canto 14, The World Soul. But when it must come back to its mortal load, what a line this is, mortal load. What burden do we bear in life? This burden of this cloak, this matter, which we must assume. And unless this is transformed, we cannot have a divine life by its very nature. It's a burden that we bear. This is the real problem. And that's why Mother and Sri Aurobindo went to the root of the problem. Inner being we can change. It's easier. By the grace, it's much easier to change. But this gross physical, this refuses.
In the God's labor.
And
the burden of earthly nature bear and tread the dolorous way.
Even those who have evolved, even those who are free, when they come back into this cloak, the burden comes. And the hard ensemble of earth's experience, then its return resumes that heavier dress. How beautifully he has explained the whole process. For long before Earth's solid vest was forced, by the technique of the atomic void, a lucent envelope of self-disguise was woven round the secret spirit in things.
That's
very interesting and works at so many levels. That before this solid matter was formed, obviously in the process of self-condensation of the spirit, the subtle matter was formed. And that's where we see beginnings of the particles which will eventually become atoms, atomic void. So it's the void which is teeming with these particles. In Tantra, they describe that when they look at forms, they see them as particles. Even it's common experience, inner experience, where one can look at things and see those radiant particles all around. So, and when scientists entered into the atom and they are going deeper and deeper, Mother did say that they have actually unwittingly entered the occult worlds.
Yes.
Because this is how it is formed. First it's subtle and it's very nice. See, even scientists describe that in the plane where you enter into these particles, the play of particles, there is a play of many probabilities. It's not something fixed. The laws are very different, almost chaotic, because it's teeming with possibilities. Unlike when you come into gross matter. So gross matter follows fixed laws like Newton in physics. But the subtle matter doesn't follow these laws. It follows a different pattern. In fact, very difficult to fix it into laws. There are laws, but they are very, very subtle. They change. And almost there is a reversal. So, you know how beautifully Sri Aurobindo has anticipated and seen and known these things.
I think science is coming
Coming
closer.
Yes.
Sri Aurobindo once said
At
that
least, yes.
they are just approaching it from
Yeah,
another direction.
Another direction. So at least one end it is begin to come, one layer. The subtle realms from those bright sheets are made. Now here he uses the word subtle realms, not just the subtle man, physical. Now all these realms are subtle because they are not gross, the subtle physical, the vital and the mental. But here, very interestingly, Sri Aurobindo described the kingdoms of the subtle matter. It's a subtle matter which is not accessible to the gross senses, but exist. And all this aura, the mother says it's formed from two things: something of the physical and something of the psychological condition of her being. It creates this. It's like an envelope which is around all things. This wonder world with all its radiant boom of vision and inviolate happiness only for expression cares and perfect form. So each of these worlds has its own characteristic movement. It picks up one aspect of the divine and runs it through many shades and hues right up to the absolute. For instance, in the mental world, it's a knowledge sheet or thought. That's how it is formed. In the vital worlds, it's force. It cares for force. So force can climb up to its luminous peaks, absolute force, or it can sink into the nether deeps, the dark force. Similarly, in the subtle world, it's about form. So everything there is beautiful, charming, in form, in the heights as well as the abysses. And here comes this line to caution us. Fair on its peaks, it has dangerous nether plains. Its light draws towards the verge of nature's lapse. It lends beauty to the terror of the gulfs and fascinating eyes to perilous gods. Invests with grace the demon and the snake. It's very interesting. In modern psychology, if you read the description of antisocial personality, it's closest to the demonic type, because we don't use pejorative terms, but antisocial is that constantly comes in conflict with the law from childhood, they are prone to stealing, etc. But the interesting part is many of these boys and girls, they are very charming, very fascinating, and one can easily fall prey to just their charm. They are very handsome. I mean, Charles Sobraj is one such instance, where even while in jail for forgeries, thug and murders, still he could manage to, convince a woman, and she got married with him while he was in jail. Just imagine.
Incredible. Yes.
Incredible.
Yes.
They carry that charm around them. And there are so many instances in history where this kind of a charm, and there are even some so-called, people mistake. Look at Osama bin Laden. I mean, if you look at the face, somebody told me that, his face, he looks like a mystic. I said, yes, but a mystic of the most dark and dangerous kind.
Yeah, that's true.
His face had that kind of a charm. So there are, perilous, and in Vedas they describe 4 types of asura. One of them is this kind who has a very, very charming and beautiful face.
And voice often.
Voice, yes, and a radiant face. And is described as something shining, which Hitler was misled into. So you see how Sri Aurobindo, this is another beauty. Very often people say, well, there are other mystics who know about subtle physical, vital, mental, so what's new about it? The new is that they have known these things through the veil of the mind, some glimpse or some door has opened momentarily in the psychic and they've glimpsed something, but it's not a total seeing. The total seeing comes only with the supramental vision. This is something very important to remember. Sometimes I read some of these, people talk about experiences. And it's all right. We are entering an age when people will talk about experiences, subjective experiences, because we have entered that age. But we should not mistake that just because there is a semblance of an experience with, let's say, something that Mother and Sri Aurobindo have experienced, we should not be led into mistaking, oh, I have had the same experience. So I was reading somebody who is talking about the experience of oneness, was writing, oh, we had the experience of oneness and something very similar, what Sri Aurobindo and the Mother described. Now one can only laugh at this. I remember myself, maybe in 84 or 85, experiencing while in a military cantonment, cycling down a road. Very vivid experience this. Like as I said, those things are very concrete. I remember that while cycling in the late afternoon, towards evening, suddenly the road began to shake everything and it became alive with a conscious presence. I was actually experiencing, I didn't use the word divine, but it was like the divinity which was awake in everything, the barrier, the inanimate object, the trees. But it will be very foolish if I say, oh, I had the same experience like Sri Aurobindo had in the jail of Vasudevam Sarvamiti. That is a supramental experience. This is just a little glimpse shown by grace. So this is how we can stop, in our real inner journey by holding on to an experience and thinking, oh, I have had this.
Yes.
So that's why when Sri Aurobindo describes the same thing, mystics do talk about the subtle physical. They
Yes.
do talk about the divine who is in everything. But that is an intuitive seeing where they experience. That's why there is a disconnect between the experience and the actual life. Because it's an intuitive sense sometimes, some mystics can rise to a height where they intuitively sense the divine in all things. But here it's a supramental oneness where with the supramental vision and the supramental consciousness Sri Aurobindo sees. So the same experience can come at different layers, and that's what we must remember when we read these things, that it's not the same thing, that when any mystic describes. That's why we see such a detailed, all-comprehensive description. Its trance imposes earth's inconscience. Immortal it weaves for us death's somber robe and authorizes our mortality. So it is the material from which the West has to be woven. So it gives this material. But to whom? Inconscient. So inconscient is a bad tailor. He makes a mess of it. The material is good. But he mixes it so badly, dyes it, God knows what he does with it. Puts many layers, makes it thick, and then says, sir, here is your dress. Now that's what the inconscient has been doing for a long time. And the time has come to tell the tailor, look, we need a change. It was all right for the previous layers of evolution, but we need now another dress. When your inner being changes, it becomes refined. Really, this gross body does appear something so gross, crude. It's so beautiful at one level, but so crude. Everything in us, heavy, bones, all the structures, digestion, complicated process, the need to eat, eliminate. You wonder, this is not worthy of the inner resident. But that's the kind of cloak that matter has been, inconscient has been weaving for us. And so the subtle physical says, all right, I can't help it. I have given this tissue, but after a while, this material has to go back. So authorizes our mortality. This medium serves a greater consciousness, a vessel of its concealed autocracy. It is the subtle ground of matter's worlds. So again, he suddenly takes us a leap into pure science. that this is the subtle ground, the matrix,
Matrix.
yes, of matter's worlds. So at that level, you can do many things which you cannot do with gross matter. Llamas are known to fly. Of course, not the body. It will be too much to believe that their gross physical was flying all over. No. But in the subtle physical, yes, they can fly. You can appear at different places at the same time.
Alexandra David Neal speaks
Yes,
of
speaks
being in
about that.
Tibet, and the people who carried the mail
Yes.
went 1 foot above the earth,
Yes.
and they traveled 1 foot
Absolutely.
above the earth.
So this is possible. In fact, if there is too much of this refinedness, the body itself, the gross body can to an extent rise up because it begins to be impressed, or this subtle change can impose itself to an extent that even its grip of gravity can momentarily lose itself. That's how the siddhi of levitation happens.
Yes.
But of course, it's only for a while. You can't be levitating all the while, unless you try something which in, this guru in America, I don't want to take his name because all said and done he was open to Mother and Sri Aurobindo. And he had become a mini guru while here.
Yes.
And the mother told him, if you want to do this, you go out and don't stay here.
Yes.
Here you have to be a child. You don't take disciples and start, But anyways, he went out. He had love for Mother and Sri Aurobindo, all said and done.
He did. He had a huge calling in
Huge,
the US.
the United Nations
Yeah.
Secretary General was amongst his disciples.
Yes.
And, so he used to do these things, lifting
people up.
people up. And,
Like that. Yes.
and there was another guru recently who used to show levitation, but what they discovered was that there was a machine down below, and this machine would propel him, and whole thing was a play of light, how illusions are created, and he would come up and everybody would be. So that's of course, but there is a real levitation. Sri Aurobindo himself has experienced it.
And I don't know if I told this one before, but my friend Dimitri von Morenschild,
Yes.
he lived here till he was 100.
Oh,
He came at the invitation of Eleanor Montgomery, who was
right.
very
Yeah.
close to Mother.
Yes.
And
A fashion designer.
yes, and he couldn't stand the ashram. He said these departments and these children wearing this dress and shorts and everything. He says, I'm going back. And Eleanor says, but at least you should see the Mother once. No, I don't want to see her. No. Go to the tennis ground, and Mother is playing tennis. He told me this personally. He never told anyone else. He goes to the tennis ground, and Mother's hitting a ball, and she looks at him. He says, I rose 3 feet in the air, and I stood there.
Wow.
And from then on, he was hers.
And this is the secret of this place. I think Rishabh Chand, said this, and at least I tell this to all who come here to live in the ashram. He said, see, there is only one rule of living here, but one rule which you have to faithfully follow. All other things you forget. If you look at the disciples, you will never want to stay here. If you look at the Mother, you will never want to go from here.
Very good.
This is what Rishabh Chand told Mother. Mother, if people come and look at us, they would never want to stay here. And what a wonderful disciple he was. I mean,
Yes.
so, because, every disciple is a product in the making. He is not a finished product. So there are beautiful things which are manifested by the grace. It's not the disciple's greatness, but the greatness of the grace. And sometimes it can get into people's head. At the same time, there are other parts which are being worked upon. So it's not a finished product. But when we look at the Mother, who would want to ever leave even for a moment? Well, situations, circumstances, and things of life, and above all, the fact that she abides with us wherever we go. With that safety, one has to go and come.
Yes.
But the heart remains here. Something very central remains here. So this is the interesting part, as you said about Dimitri, that when he looked at people, for whatever reasons, he didn't want to stay here one moment.
No.
And Eleanor Montgomery was obviously very wise to tell him that at least you meet the Mother.
Yeah.
And that's it. That is done. This famous letter of Sri Aurobindo was written to her. When she wanted to come to the ashram, she had such amazing experiences. she would cry when she would read this book, The Mother, but hide it very carefully so that others don't know. Because see, that was the time, especially in America, the society was not open to these inner experiences. People would probably label you as crazy. So, Sri Aurobindo wrote to her when she wanted to come to the ashram that you must know that this ashram is a laboratory, as X puts it. And then he says that don't come expecting all refined natures. Every type of nature has been brought here for the transformation. And well, she came and had her own beautiful experiences even before coming here.
But when I came as a young boy, everyone was a god.
Well, yes, I had the same experience. I do believe that at some level everyone is.
I think so.
Everything was beautiful.
Oh, yes.
In fact, I remember one
yeah.
of the first conferences I attended, and I said, I asked Vijay Bhai, I said one thing, said any question, I said I have one question which is very different. It's not about the topics being discussed and all. But I don't know, I feel this ashram is packed with geniuses. And he simply smiled. I'm amazed that nowhere at one place I find so many geniuses in different fields. And they move about in such a simple manner. Some of them on a cycle with a tiffin carrier and a chhata, And it reminds me of another little joke. Satyajit Roy, another genius who came. We know,
Yes.
Satyajit Ray, his wonderful movie.
Yes.
And he wanted to live in the ashram. But he was also very ambitious about his career. So he asked, I think he asked Purushottam, or I may be mistaken about whom he asked, but he asked one of the sadhaks. He said, I love this, I like this place very much and I want to live here. I am drawn to the philosophy, but I have one problem, it's about my career. So the sadhak says, career? You don't have to worry about it. The first thing you will be handed is a career here. You will have a career. Because everybody moves with a career and an umbrella to the dining room. He said, don't worry about the career. And the sadhak said it in earnest. Because he didn't know about career and ambition and all those things. He said, that's all you need. You will surely. So, it's amazing how this life they have created. It's only a grace. It is the subtle ground of matter's worlds. What he has, created that here. It is the immutable in their mutable forms. In the folds of its creative memory, it guards the deathless type of perishing things. Always, in everything, that impress remains. That's why in the ashram again, people ask, but Mother and Sri Aurobindo are not there. So, of course, one answer is that they are there. It's your problem, you can't feel it. But there is another answer, which is more pragmatic. Well, their touch is there in everything. And you have to be a little open, little awake. I'm leaving apart the Yagnavedi called the Samadhi, which of course is like a powerful magnet. But every place where you go and that touch, it can really invigorate you. You can enter into contact because that touch never fades. And the Mother speaks about it. Wherever we have set our feet, we have set in motion in the very atoms, forces of the new creation. And one can feel it. I remember moving into my new place in Desiree home. When I came to know, I feel so much of Mother's presence, so different. What is there? And then I came to know Mother has gone to this place several times. So it's amazing that this touch remains in the subtle physical. Even though things perish, things change. You break open one house, make it into a different form, all that will happen. That's part of the process. But the touch of the divine, when he has touched, it remains.
Where she presses her
Our
feet,
feet, course miraculous
streams of entrancing ananda.
So this is where it guards the deathless type of perishing things. Its lowered potencies found our fallen strengths. Its thought invents our reasoned ignorance. So this is the way the subtle worlds operate, the subtle realms, not just the subtle physical. Its sense fathers our body's reflexes. So sometimes we make a sudden movement, sudden gesture. Now, if we have worked upon the body consciousness through methodical physical culture, as is the way of life in the ashram, the body reflexes become quickened. Now, what really are these reflexes? It's an automatic response. Of course, the scientists will describe the pathway. But how does it really happen that something before you have come in contact with it, suddenly your body makes the right gesture? Even it has not seen. There are people who suddenly sense that a vehicle is coming near. A lot of our, everyday life depends on this. And you just make the right gesture. You swerve a little this way, a little that way. And sometimes, of course, at the last moment, this is going to happen, and yet, you can't escape it because it's come too close. But this knowledge comes, which instantly, that's the mechanism of reflex. Because of the subtle physical, it has a certain knowledge, direct contact. And it has a great role in everyday life. People, while they are falling, suddenly make the right gestures. And, if the mind doesn't intervene, look how children, they escape unhurt. Even when they, not always, but many times, they escape unhurt even after fall and everything, simply because the mind is not developed. So subtle physical make just the right gesture. Now when the mind is not developed, say in cats, etc., spontaneously their body will make the right gesture. That's why they say cats have 9 lives. And we have this hard West. Our secret breath of untried, mightier force. Oh, beautiful. Untried. It is in us. But we have never really allowed it to have its play. The lurking sun of an instant's inner sight, its fine suggestions are a covert found. Its fine suggestions are a covert found for our iridescent, rich imaginings, touching things common with transfiguring views. The subtle physical, it feels, senses, and then there is a suggestion. The mind catches on to it and then develops into vivid imaginations, paints a picture, writes a poetry. But there is a truth, seed truth of that experience which later gets transmuted. Till even earth's mud grow rich and warm with the skies, and a glory gleams from the soul's decadence. What is soul's decadence? That it chooses to fall into the abyss. And why it does it? So that the abyss may be glorified and opens to that light. So this is why we come upon earth again and again. And the next few lines with which we will end is really very powerful. Sri Aurobindo summarizes all that he has given here. Its knowledge is our error's starting point, because the subtle physical is beginning to now plunge into the inconscient. So the error starts from that point. Its beauty dawns our mud mask ugliness. It accepts to, a cloak which is really not good, not healthy. Its artist good begins our evil's tale. A heaven of creative truths above, a cosmos of harmonious dreams between, a chaos of dissolving forms below. This is what we see in the quantum world. A chaos of dissolving forms below, it plunges lost in our inconscient base. Out of its fall, our denser matter came. So what would we call it? Poetry, art, science, truth, Veda, everything.
And here we have a break.
Yes.
And we begin next time.
Next time.
I would like you to talk a little bit about the subtle physical envelope when we begin next time.
Yes.
As a doctor especially.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Thank you.